My dad once said that Robina would either be a prostitute or a nun. Well, she apparently was a prostitute once, and now she's a nun.
The last time I heard from my aunt, she sent me a scrawled note from somewhere overseas. It read, "Happy something, happy everything. Love, Robina."
What we're trying to do here is be a spiritual person, a nice person, a bodhisattva, a compassionate person, a loving person, a person with wisdom. That's our job, that's our function. So that's our motivation. So you remind yourself, this is what I'm doing here. What's called happiness, this simple word, is the result of positive, constructive, beneficial, good, connected, we kind of energy. We don't need God or Buddha or some great philosopher to tell us this stuff. It's obvious that what counts at the time of death isn't your gorgeous body, isn't your lover, isn't your reputation, isn't Gianni Versace's billions of dollars and his endless houses and his all beautiful things, or Princess Diana's gorgeous 36-year-old body. Kind of useless at that time when she got mangled in the car and her little heart stopped beating. It became a disgusting thing, didn't it? Got buried immediately. So clearly that's not very important.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here and to have for the first time in Romania Venerable Robina Courtin. And we are here in a beautiful environment, Hermitage Urban Spiritual Hub, and I'm grateful to Claudia Damoc for the possibility to have the Buddha in the background, and then to Ionuț Harabagiu, who allowed me to meet Venerable. Yes, Venerable. You are a renowned teacher. From the last many years, you are touring all around the world and teaching, even the name of our program, teaching how to know oneself, how to see more clearly what is this, in fact, and then pieces from your activity. You were, I think, you already finished, the executive director of a liberation prison projects, also from in the editorial field, Mandala Magazine and Wisdom Publishing, isn't it?
That's right.
And then beautiful documentary, multiple winner of different international prizes, Chasing Buddha, and then Key to
Freedom.
To Freedom.
That's right, in Australia, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. It is a privilege.
Okay.
Privilege. As I feel you, if you allow to tell me, you are your energy. It's remarkable. You are as the elements coming and making us see better, because otherwise, with a sleeping life, it's...
Well, you're very poetic, Matei.
Thank you, thank you. You inspired me.
Good.
Yes. So the poesy,
yes.
The poem of your life, in a word, what's the key words of your life?
Knowing my mind and changing it.
Knowing your
with
mind.
Optimism and confidence.
Yes.
This is certainly this is the essence of what Buddha is saying.
Yeah. Knowing and changing.
Yes.
If a child asks you, Venerable, what is this now and here?
Well,
show me God, Venerable.
Show me who?
God.
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 Well, I wouldn't use that word because Buddha doesn't use that word.
Okay.
So that's a good, interesting start.
Yeah.
But maybe there's one way of, well, maybe even more to answer your first question, which is also could be my answer to someone else.
Yeah.
You know, there's an analogy in Buddhism that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So my first answer, that's the wisdom wing, knowing yourself, but not in some kind of mystical way, but in a very clear, precise way. Yeah. And let's talk about that, Buddha's skills, so that you can, you know, so that we can do, which is what Buddha has found himself, that we can radically change, radically reconfigure our very being into what? Into a completely wise, clear, blissful, courageous, and then compassionate person. So the first wing is the wisdom wing. You do the job, and then the compassion wing is because we live in this world together to be of benefit to others. That's the essence of it, actually. That's the essence of it, and this is what I attempt to.
2 wings to fly in this
world. The bird
world.
needs 2 wings: wisdom and compassion. And what's so interesting is the Dalai Lama often says, compassion, which is the point, but it's not enough, because it's got to be informed by wisdom, which is your own clarity and the removing of your own neuroses and ego-based fears and all the dramas. And this is really the essence of Buddhist psychology, and therefore Buddhist philosophy, the essence of the job of being a Buddhist.
And you know from yourself, you have an epical life, being an activist, quitting activism, being a feminist, and so on. Karate also.
That's right.
So our personal dramas and the impossibility sometimes to change it, radically change it. So how one can change radically, starting from what point, practically speaking?
Well, to answer that, in the Buddhist way, which I have to do because that's the body of knowledge that I'm using in my life as my working hypothesis and attempting to put to practice. Basically, Buddha was this person in India 2,500 years ago, which we generally know. But I think it's kind of interesting because recently I read the Dalai Lama said it was these amazing Indians 3,000 years ago, 500 years before Buddha, who were the ones who actually began this extraordinary investigation into the nature of self. And I think in our modern Christian Jewish culture, we know very little about the Indians. We know lots about the Greeks, but not much about the Indians. And this is pretty hidden, I think, to all of us. And even many Buddhists, but if we start to look more deeply into the Buddhist model, the Buddhist worldview, we're going to really see clearly these amazing Indians before him. They're the ones who actually cultivated this extraordinary psychological skill, which is what concentration, meditation is, that enables a person to get this fierce, subtle, disciplined focus way beyond the grosser level of our mind, which we don't even posit as existing in our regular models of the mind, so that you can, what they literally did was unpack and unravel the contents of their own cognitive process. We're not discussing the brain, we're discussing the inner mind. And I think this really is Buddha's expertise. What they did was then map the mind. So that's the basis of Buddha's view, and he diverged in his own direction, coming up with his own very specific findings experientially about the nature of self and therefore about the entire universe. And so, Buddha's then saying everybody's got this marvelous potential there's 2 things, and this is indicated by the word in Tibetan for the Sanskrit word Buddha. The Tibetan word Sangye. The etymology of it is so tasty. The first syllable implies, and this is Buddha's experience, we can utterly eradicate from our mind all ego, all fears, all anger, all neurosis. And that even itself is a pretty radical concept. None of our models of the mind would suggest that. And then secondly, even more, we can totally develop. This is indicated by the second syllable, gye. We can develop to perfection all the goodness, all the wisdom, all the clarity, all the compassion, all the kindness. So that's essentially what Buddha's saying.
Sangye.
Sangye is the Tibetan word for Buddha, and that's the etymology. So that's essentially what you're doing as a Buddhist. You're taking Buddha's methodology, which he's telling us, this is what I did to become a Buddha. It's up to you now if you would like to use this methodology. So also this is why Buddha, because he's not a creator and doesn't assert a creator, he wouldn't use the term God, he doesn't use the word soul. He's a regular guy who became this. And so in that sense, this is a hands-on, serious job, not merely just a job of believing in what Buddha says, but actually attempting one step at a time to do it and apply it.
Even though we have all these remarkable possibilities, I think...
What do you mean remarkable possibilities?
To change ourselves using the Sangye technology. Yes, sure. Even though we have this possibility.
That's right.
Thousands of people are not using it, are not believing it. Even though you were in different places in Romania, you will have here retreat.
That's right.
But you find people who even they heard you, they feel you, they are...
Well, I think that's why we have to understand what the obstacles are.
Yes,
and
the obstacles.
That's why it's so enormous. I think, first of all, I think it's interesting to remember that because Buddha's not a creator, therefore all the information called Buddhism is not from revelation. And that's, I think, our default assumption about religion,
Yes.
So the second point is, therefore, that we have to be very clear what he's saying and not just accept it and believe in it and think it's kind of nice, but try to really understand it. So, and because he's not a creator, therefore I would say actually, and I like to say this to people, everything Buddha's saying, he didn't make it up, he didn't create it, and he doesn't own it.
He discovered
but he doesn't own it.
Yeah.
So but he's simply pointing it out, and I think we can see this is actual universal wisdom. If any of us, lots of what Buddha says, many people can say, yes, I agree with that. But I think the unique thing about the Buddha is very specific approach to what the mind or what consciousness is. It's not some mystical part of us. Buddha would say the word mind or the word consciousness, they're synonymous. They refer not only to the thoughts, but the feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition. This is the entire spectrum of our inner being. And what the Buddha is saying is, as opposed to thinking that some part of us is kind of mysterious, he says we can unpack and unravel and deconstruct all of it and then literally reconstruct it into this perfect mind. He says that's the potential of all. So therefore, so then the job is then to know your own mind, and that's the wisdom wing. So concentration meditation, and the world knows it more broadly as mindfulness meditation, is one aspect of it. This is almost like your starting point. But then on the basis of that, we need to really, if we want to be Buddhist, understand the way Buddha describes the states of mind. Perhaps we can discuss that, and look at the obstacles for why what appears evident is actually really hard for us to see, and not even to mention do, you know. And I suppose the Buddha would say we've got these very deep habits. So one of our fundamental habits, I think, a deep assumption in all of our minds, is that we assume suffering and happiness come from out there. So if you're my boyfriend and you're mean to me, why are you suffering, Robina? You know, because Matei is unkind to me. Equally, why am I happy? Because Matei is kind to me. And I think everybody, we take that as a given. Buddha doesn't disagree that you don't play a role in my happiness and suffering, but he's saying it's more nuanced and more subtle than that. And when we can really realize that actually my own approach to you, my attitude towards you, my interpretation of you, which is my mind, that is the source. So I can change that.
So in reality, it's an inner construction, 19%.
Buddha would say probably 100% of what we're seeing and seeing out there is through the lenses of our own constructions, our own projections. And it's not some mystical thing. It's actually quite subtle. The more you study this and unpack all this, it's quite actually sophisticated. But that's the principle that he's...
Of course.
Which, so I mean, my feeling is Buddhism is actually a worldview, and that's studied in great depth in the Tibetan Buddhist monastic university system. And that just, you know, we talk about karma and past lives and this very deep philosophy. But forgetting all that, actually the fundamental point, I think, that Buddha's making, everybody could agree, a communist could agree, a good Catholic could agree, a materialist would agree, that if we're brave enough, we can observe our own thoughts and we can see that we can change them. That's the essential point. And this is why I love to use sometimes extreme examples, because I work with many people in prison, and especially in the United States, where there's very severe sentencing, very big numbers of people in prison.
Lifetime sentences.
It's massive, you know. The numbers are appalling, and then of course death row. So I remember there was one woman. I didn't know this woman, but I read her memoir. And for me, she's this most extraordinary example of exactly this point. I don't think she was a Buddhist. I think she did yoga, different things. But she was accused with her husband of murdering 2 police, but was innocent. He was even executed. I mean, that alone, you can't even bear to think of the suffering. She was there 17 years, and she in fact got out. But the point, at some point she said, and this is the essence of it, I realized at some point I couldn't change anything out there, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So I mean, that we love to hear these things, but if you really think about it, I mean, even to be accused of breaking the cup and you didn't break it, we're so tortured, we're so determined to get the person to see the truth. You can't imagine the nightmare, 17 years of this hell. But she actually had this extraordinary intelligence, and I'd say courage, to do, in fact, this is exactly what Buddha's saying, but look how hard that is. The normal world would be, you go completely crazy, and we would say, we understand why she's crazy, and that's normal. But she had this extraordinary capacity. And you don't need to think about past lives to do that. And that's really the essence of it. And the simple point that Buddha's making, it's not religious, you know, it's practical. We tend to think of it as all mystical and holy, but actually, all Buddha's saying is, check when you're caught up in jealousy, depression, blame, anger. Look how you feel. It's a nightmare. And then look how you feel. If you can be forgiving, loving, compassionate, intelligent, look how you feel. It's not even a belief, it's just hard work. So that's the point. If we can see our own selves, the benefit to ourselves, forget the benefit to others, of working on our mind, it's so clear, but how hard it is, because we would rather be caught up in the blame. The irony of ego is it's a victim, you know.
Yes.
This is what's so immensely difficult.
Yes. And then, Venerable, we're trying to understand through the modern psychology, how can we change the person. So modern psychology, I think one of the basic ideas is that change can occur only through relationship.
Yeah, I know, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Through another one,
exactly,
compassionate another one.
Exactly.
Not to be alone in a cave.
No, it's a very fascinating series of assumptions right there.
And this is, in fact, the Buddha's assumption. Compassion, this means together, the togetherness. So you change your life because you've met two remarkable teachers. Yeah, isn't it?
Okay, this is an interesting point. So get back to your first point.
Please.
I don't know, I haven't studied in depth Western psychology or any of the models, but I think is what you suggest, what you said seems to suggest to me, and I've heard this, that there's an assumption in our culture that we are by definition social beings, and we can only grow in relation to others.
Yes.
Okay, the first point, the wisdom wing, and this is why we don't understand the Buddhist view. If we think of a yogi up in the mountains on his own, this to us almost seems like being autistic and mentally ill. We can't conceptualize what he's doing. And that's why I think the Buddhist view, we need to understand it. And that has to come before the compassion wing.
Okay.
That has to come. Because and Buddha's essential point is, if we're overwhelmed by fears and ego and depression and anger and jealousy, I can't even help a fly. I can't see past my own nose. So I need, even in my relationship with you as my boyfriend, the work I'm going to do has to be on my own mind. It can't always be in discussion with you, because then what ego does is always want to compromise, and if you be kind, I'll be kind. But the real work has to be internal. So then it has to be me taking responsibility for my jealousy. If you're coming home late, I'm convinced you're out with another girl, I'm freaking out, you come home, I have a fight, and then we calm down. But if I'm working on my mind, not with you, that's my jealousy, my fears. I've got to work with that. And then when you come home, I'll be reasonable, hello darling, how are you? And then everything's sorted. But we have to work first on ourselves. And that seriously is what these great yogis in the mountain are doing this extraordinary job with these amazing Indians first developed, this profound, clear, disciplined job of unpacking and unraveling our inner contents. We don't have a concept like that in our culture. We just simply don't have it. Even the Buddha's view of the mind, you go beyond the conceptual, beyond the sensory. That just sounds mystical to us. So necessarily the first job has to be internal. Even if it's a little bit every day. You don't all have to go to the mountains. Then on the basis of my own clarity, then I can have a valid relationship with you, compassion.
Even though the capacity to see, to have a clear inner see, as I understood, is developed through the relationships.
Well, it is, it's true, but that's the same as anything, isn't it? Think of music, think of cooking.
Everything.
I remember, I always use the example, people often ask about the relationship, which is what we would like to discuss now, with the guru, as they say in Sanskrit, the spiritual teacher. But like often what happens, because it's spiritual, we make it very romantic. But so I often point out, but think of anything you've learned in your life that you didn't first learn from someone else.
Nothing.
So this is really obvious, and that's really more interdependence. We depend upon, there's a lovely word in Tibetan, it's the Dalai Lama's name, Tenzin. It means knowledge holder. Well, I always quote the example of when I first learned to make a cake from my mother. She was a cake knowledge holder. I'd never wanted to make a cake until I was in my 20s. Then I was ready to make a cake. That's the first step. I had to want it. Then I asked her. And then I remember the day, the cake. It's because it's the first time cakes became real for me, because, yes, my mother passed on the knowledge, but I had to be ready for it, I had to want it, I had to ask for it. That's my job. Then I listen and I receive the knowledge. That's exactly the same as my relationship with my teachers, spiritually. But I think we understand this in all of our knowledge.
Yes, yes, the inner dimension becomes first anyway.
It has to be, even the step that I have to want it. So me with my spiritual teachers, I met them first in Australia, when I was early 30s. I was 40 something years ago. And I was, by that point, having been a Catholic first, then a hippie, then a radical lefty, then a feminist, sort of looking for a way to see the world,
Yes.
And a way to act also, not internal, but also a way to describe the world. I wanted that very much, but a way to act in it. So then I met these Tibetans in Australia. So that was very clear. first hearing the teachings was quite shocking because I'd been a radical political activist, and they suggested I should start to know my own mind, and I'd never heard of that before. It was a brand new idea to me. You understand?
Yes.
So then, but I knew there was something there that I'd been missing, and that was the worldview that I'm now working with these 40 years later. But yes, absolutely, totally dependent on that. But the starting point has to be wanting it, and then listening to it, and then I can take that knowledge on board and do that myself.
Yeah.
But the first step has to be this internal.
Yes, and then the shocks of our life.
The shocks, the bad things happening.
Yes. And then you consider yourself in a way a shocking venerable.
Well, I don't fit. It seems I don't fit the cliched view of what a Buddhist nun should look like, or talk like. I talk fast. I'm energetic. I get excited.
Yeah. Yes. And this is very, very natural. This is the universe. So our cliche is the problem. Yes.
Of spiritual things.
Spiritual
that's
things.
Right.
Then, yes.
That's right.
Being peaceful.
That's right.
Yes.
Walking slowly.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. All of this.
Yes.
Which was a great. I mean, for me, the Dalai Lama is a great example of that. When you're around him, you see he talks so fast. He's very dynamic. He's very funny. He's very powerful. He's not a quiet and sweet person. So I think it's very nice to have a good example like that.
And then all of this life perspective, it have to be centered in some fundamental values.
What do you mean?
For example, ethics. I don't know.
I mean, of course, this is the point of being. Okay, maybe just for our own sake and our discussion, I should try and present the Buddhist approach and how this links to ethics.
For example, if a person came to you in front of you, Venerable, and become aggressive with you and shout to you, this is not an ethical way of being. What is your answer? It's happened to you?
I don't think I want to answer that. I'd rather tell you how ethics fits completely into what we've begun to discuss, being your own therapist.
Please.
So, and the Buddha's fundamental point is that we've got this marvelous potential to develop ourselves into this extraordinary being with the bird with the two wings, fully developed in clarity and wisdom, fully developed in compassion, then capable of benefiting others, okay? So the starting point has to be, like junior school level is basically practicing ethics. And that the first step is, Buddha would suggest, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't harm others. So I think it's a really crucial point to remember why, if I am as a Catholic, my Jesuit priest friend, I asked him, what is a sin by definition?
Yes.
He said, by definition, it is going against the will of God. Now that fits perfectly with the creator model. God is the boss. God creates the universe. God is my source. I am the product of God. So of course I must do what God says. And then God has the power to punish and reward. I think that normally is our view of morality and ethics, isn't it?
Yes.
But in my mother's household, it's the same. When I was a little girl, my mummy said to me, don't do that. And I guarantee when I said, why not? Her answer would be exactly the same, because I say so. So it says, Buddha would suggest that's a dualistic view of morality, and we assume morality is like this, and we assume religions is. It's information imposed upon us from the outside.
Yes.
Buddha's view is fundamentally different, and this is a crucial one to understand if we want to try and take on board Buddha's approach.
Please, Venerable.
So Buddha would say, his observation is that he would suggest, exhort us not to kill, not to lie, in exactly the same way as our mother or Jesus. But his reason is fundamentally different. He would say a negative action by definition is an action that harms another. It's a natural law. So that's where the compassion comes in. But the first stage of practice, the most simple piece is he would suggest we don't kill and lie and steal, because guess what, Robina? That will harm you. And this is the view of Buddha's, a fundamental philosophy of karma, which is dealt with in massive depth in the literature, and which many people, we all understand in a very cliched way, is that we bring our consciousness with us. Our consciousness goes back to beginningless time. And every millisecond of what any sentient being thinks or does or says programs our consciousness, leaves seeds in our consciousness. So Buddha, in a simple sense, as Dalai Lama says, we're created by ourselves. So we come into this life, Buddha says, and ants and dogs too, fully programmed with our own programming, our own seeds. So therefore we are the one, literally, as a result of our past, are now the person that we are. So then we have to look into our lives and you simply say, do I want suffering? No, I'm sick of suffering. Do you want happiness? Yes, please.
The unconscious lies.
The what?
So sometimes we think that we are authentic with ourselves, but in fact we get from no reason angry. For example.
So then the question?
The question is, what about all that is all our neuroses,
Okay,
deep neuroses?
that's high school. That's being your own therapist.
Okay,
so Buddha says,
yes.
given that we're driven from countless lives by neurosis, we're basically programmed with our past unhappiness and past... With our happiness too, we're good, but we're looking at the rubbish stuff now. So given that we're driven by all the voices of ego, in the Buddhist model of the mind, it's very interesting, he basically describes the contents of our mind into three categories. There are millions of states of mind, but he divides them into three. There's one lot that are the neurotic, ego-based ones, and that sounds kind of brutal, but they've got a very clear way of distinguishing these. They're the ones that are disturbing, they're delusional, they lead us up garden paths, and then because we practiced them for so long. In this life, when I was a kid, my mother did not have to teach me to be angry, Matei. I knew how, because I came programmed with it. The first level, my mother could not ask me to start looking at my anger. That's ridiculous. It's too advanced. But she can help me have control over my body and speech, which are the servants of my anger. That's why junior school level, live in disciplined life. Not to suffocate yourself because someone said, but for your own benefit. Don't vomit out every word. Don't jump on every girl. Don't stuff every piece of cake in your mouth. Not because it's moralistic, because it's for your sake. Then you have the luxury now of developing some concentration, understanding the Buddhist model of the mind, and going deep and unpacking and unraveling what we assume naturally is unconscious. Buddha says it's all knowable. That's what he's so amazing about. We can unpack and unravel and know and change all of it. So that's why first one. So in your question, back to your question, you come along and shout at me. If I'm working on myself, I will control my speech and control my body, and at least don't respond. That's the answer. And get the hell out of your way, maybe you're crazy. Don't sit there and get all cosmic. But don't harm you back. That's the first one. Then, then even I'm more advanced, I can even help you. But first step is don't harm back. First step is control the body and speech. If we could do this on this earth, the earth would be a happy place. Because it's behavior. It's behavior that affects each other. Behavior is the first level, though. Then you get to the mind where the source of it is. That's the Buddhist approach.
I never heard so clear picture.
I understand.
Of what we have to do. Thank you. Thank you, Venerable.
Yep. Good, Matei.
And then, you see, in television programs, in this moment, I have, even though I think you said all.
Okay. We can unpack it more, we can go further, we can go into more detail, whatever you like. It's good to be practical, not just theoretical, isn't it?
Practical. Let's come to practice. Do you recommend a small practice for our viewers, daily practice? Well,
I like to say to people, first of all, Buddha's not the boss, we are. Because he's not a creator, and he's not asserting a creator. He's just like an advisor, like a doctor, So he gives advice. And then, so first of all, you can be a 1% Buddhist. Like I mentioned, you might never need to even think about the business of karma, where I come from, and all this business. But we can all see, if we can all recognize the benefit to myself of being less angry, less neurotic. Even that alone is fantastic. That's why I think in the world these days, lots of people who wouldn't even think about Buddhism are actually learning this mindfulness technique that's in so many psychologists in many cultures now are using. So that's a really good start. Even I would say, even more simply, the very first step is to have some honest recognition that yes, I have fears and I have depression, I have anger, I have jealousy, and this is already powerful, but not always to assume I'm a poor innocent victim and it's not my fault, it's a boyfriend's fault and mummy's fault and daddy's fault and not that. At least recognize maybe I can do something about it.
Is my fault, I'm responsible?
Well, to have even the beginnings of a sense of empowerment, because the other one is victim and hopelessness. Then all I want you to do is change and I'll sit there miserable. But you first have to have this thought, it's possible, I can do something on my own mind, regardless of my lousy boyfriend, regardless of the boss. This is why that woman's story is so dramatic. She could change nothing, but she could see she could work on her mind. And who benefited? Herself. That's the point. It's not a holy thing, it's practical. So if we can recognize that alone, that even to sit in the morning, before you jump into breakfast and the kids and the job and the car, with yourself for a couple of minutes, sit quietly with your back straight, close your eyes, and simply focus on, and this is one of Buddha's techniques, it's so simple, that, you know, our breath happens naturally, right? Yeah. And there's a sensation just here when we breathe. Locate that, and then for 2 minutes with determination, just pay attention to my breath. So why would I do that? Because normally, isn't it true, we're utterly unconscious of 99% of what's going on deeper down. We even just assume it's this unconscious and is unknowable. And we only notice what's there when it vomits out the mouth. So this is the job of this one of being your own therapist, to begin with just stepping out of your head for 2 minutes, focusing on your breath. So the goal of this is not to just space out. The goal isn't to have some kind of vision. The goal isn't to make all the thoughts go away even. The goal isn't to relax, because you just go to sleep. We're training the mind to focus. And that means, because you're even focusing for 2 minutes on the breath, you're stepping out of your head. They're all going to be, the thoughts will be there. Don't worry about it. That's good, in fact. Then we're starting to notice them. And that's the point. So as we progress, we will start this technique of recognizing what you're feeling, not following it, but recognizing in the corner of your mind. Do you understand? Then when you're driving the car and you're all anxious and get to work and the lights come red, then you'll get angry. But now, because you're learning to notice what's happening deeper down, as well as noticing the traffic, then you can be working on your mind deeper down. It's a practical thing, but we have to start to learn it. But the starting point has to be some confidence, no matter how bad I feel, no matter how crazy life is, that I can do something about this, not just believe it's only the world out there and I have no choice. That's the first step.
This
and
is the fundament of freedom, in a way, to know that we may choose how to do it with our life and to change it.
This is
the best
not
news.
Change, no, you can't, like the woman in prison. She could change nothing.
Externally.
But they couldn't take my mind from me, so I decided, talk about radical change, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. That's a massive change, to have that level of ability to change her own concept so that she could learn to be happy.
So the only thing we may change is our view of reality, not reality.
Precisely, that's exactly right.
So if we want to change the world...
that's the compassion wing.
Okay.
But you've got to put yourself together to some degree, have courage and clarity and confidence in who you are, and know that you can handle the world, because the world's a pretty suffering place. Then to whatever degree you can help others, help the dog, help the ant, help the next door neighbour. And the more wisdom you get from this first job, the more capability you have to bear the suffering and to stay steady and not be overwhelmed by it, and more confidence and courage to help others.
Okay, so this means that all the leaders of the world had to be compassionate, but they cannot be compassionate
until you've got some clarity in yourself.
They have not the wisdom wing.
Precisely, you can't.
So this word, it's quite a mess, because we are not applying the two wings perspective.
Exactly. Well, first, because we're blaming everybody else for our problem. We all go around crazy blaming everybody, and as long as we keep doing this, nothing will ever change. We'll just get more crazy, and more crazy. That's the essence of it. The world is a crazy place. Let's say you don't even have explanations why. Buddha's got his own explanations. That's another discussion. But even if we don't know why there's war here and craziness there, even if we don't have an answer, let's say, we can still, like that woman, she knew she could not change prison. She accepted she'd even going to be executed. But meanwhile, she learned on becoming a sane, clear person internally. That's what I found with all my friends in prison. I have a friend on death row in Kentucky, Mitch. He's getting ready for his death date, you know, and he says, I'm ready for that electric jolt, Robina. We cracked jokes the whole time. He says, he's transformed his life. He's 30 years there. He's a good human being who's accepted his reality, you know, regretted the suffering he's caused, and he helps all the people on death row. He's just this wonderful human being who's content with himself, at home with himself, you know, ready for that electric jolt. He meditates every day with compassion for the person who's going to kill him, you know, so he doesn't get freaked out in the time of death. So that's very intense examples of good ones. You know, and the irony is, he and that woman have no choice. They can't get out of those cells. But we sometimes might as well be in prison. There we are, stuck in our lousy relationship. Years ago, realising it had all finished, but too scared to leave because, mummy won't accept it. I shouldn't do it. The world won't approve. What'll I do? I have no security. We live in our fears, and hating this person in the bed next to us. I can't imagine how people bear to live like this, because we don't think we can change our own mind. And we don't even realise we can change our own life. Or you go back to the same job all the time, hating the boss, hating your colleagues, miserable.
Yes.
Neither changing your job nor changing your mind. No wonder we go crazy. So at least to have the courage, if you can leave the job, have the courage to know you leave it. And why continue to be crazy, you know? This is the suffering we have. This is why my examples of my friends in prison who have no choice about the outside. They know their only choice is the internal. So we might as well be in prison sometimes, because we're paralysed by our own misery. And we really believe it's the boss's fault. We really believe it's that horrible wife's fault, or the next door neighbour, or the sister-in-law, you know? That's our trouble. Yes. They might be horrible, but the Buddha says that's their problem. What's yours, honey, is your fears, your attachment, your anger, your depression. So it's this practical stuff, but it's intense, you know?
Very intense.
Wow. We're the boss.
Yeah. so clear again, and so the examples are sharp clear.
There you go.
I imagine the prison and the waiting, knowing the day of the hour of the
exactly.
death.
That's right. Your death.
We don't know.
No, that's right.
We
exactly.
think that we are immortals.
You know, that's right. Death is a long way off. You know.
Yeah.
We know. That's right. Yes.
What about death, Robinas?
What about it?
Venerable. Sorry.
No, I don't. You call me what you like. What about it? What about death? What's the question?
Yes. Each one of us are scared.
That's right.
Scared to disappear.
Right,
Scared to
exactly.
what?
Scared to not be me, isn't it? Scared to let go of this
and
view
then,
we have of ourselves.
Supernatural.
That's right.
So of course I will go. My soul will go. All this stuff.
That's okay. That's all right. No?
We need
this.
This.
Recently, one of the books I've edited. One of my jobs is to edit my teachers' books. So one of them is now published in English. It's also available as a free PDF in English if people want it. It's very, very, very beneficial. For me, it's actually quite a long title, but it's the point of it from the Buddhist perspective. It's how to help our loved ones, as Lama Zopa puts it, enjoy death, which sounds very weird for us in the world, and so they can get a good rebirth. So, okay, the Buddha's view, first of all, in the Buddhist Vajrayana techniques, in the more esoteric Buddhist teachings, there are very detailed, precise descriptions of the death process, based upon the experience of the great meditators who've actually been through, you know, who remember it. This is what Buddha would say. So it's a very helpful explanation, first of the death process itself and what happens and when the person leaves and when the consciousness goes, or as Christians would call it, the soul. So it's really helpful to understand. But then the crucial part of it is how to help your loved ones, because we have this immense fear. So Buddhism has these detailed descriptions of why we have fear, because we have this primordial grasping and attachment at this sense of self, at our body, and the utter fear of losing it, you know. So when we understand, I mean, the Buddhist philosophy, one of the first things they get us to think about is impermanence, that we begin to see the evident fact that things change, relationships change, roses die, glasses break, life finishes. So, and the Buddha would say all the way across the board, the extent to which we suffer when it comes to impermanence and death is not the fact that we will die or the fact that our loved one will leave us, is because we're clinging to it and don't want them to die and don't want that beautiful cup of my grandmother to break. So we're living in a fantasy world, because reality, not cosmic reality, practical reality is we all know things change and we don't know when. So dealing with living our lives in this practical way, in the context of knowing things change, knowing I will die at any moment, knowing my beloved will die, knowing my cat will die, you don't get depressed about it then, you accept it as part of reality. And then the irony is, instead of living in denial of it and clinging to the present, you know it's changing, and so you don't want to waste it. You don't sit back, you know, if I really realise that you could leave me at any moment, or that you could die at any moment, my beloved boyfriend, then I'll cling less, but I'll enjoy every day and make the most of it. And then when you do die, I'll know it's natural, but it won't rip my heart out, you know. So the Buddha's key point is, one way of saying what he's saying is, the extent to which we're caught up in fantasies, not reality, is the extent to which we suffer. So that, again, it's the same job, unpacking the fantasies in the mind, the denial of impermanence, the denial of, and that's why we cling so strongly. So then really the Buddhist view is then live your life this way, and then when death comes, you're not shocked and you're ready for it. And of course, Buddha would suggest we go on to a next life and so on and so forth, you know. But at the same time, even the soul and the future, that's okay. If my mummy's dying and she's a Catholic, one way of helping her, because she's fearful and doesn't want to go, I'd talk to her about God, how God loves her, how heaven is, she look forward to heaven. Why not, you know? At least it relaxes her mind and she can relax and let go and die with a happy mind. And that's important for the Buddhists. I mean, there's lots of things to talk about, but I think the crucial one is to live your life in the context of impermanence. Then you appreciate the good things more and you won't want to waste your precious life. You understand?
Yes, to live each moment
That's right. As if it were the last. Then you really appreciate. And that's what I really can see with my friends, you know, on death row, for example. Mitch knows he's going to be dead in a couple of years, you know. And even then, it's ironic, one of his friends on death row, whom I knew, he was getting ready for his death date, but suddenly he died of leukemia instead. So even then, his death date wasn't certain. Even though he had a certainty, and still he died before. So the key about impermanence is not to waste your life. That's the key.
Yes, yes. It's beautiful, you see. We only have, few minutes, I think, 5 minutes.
Okay, good.
So this is the time, so the end, so to enjoy.
That's right, every moment.
Yeah, every moment.
Be moral, be kind, be good, for your sake and for the sake of others. That's the two wings again. I think one of the biggest things we think in religion is, oh, you've got to somehow suffer and only love others. But the interesting point of the wisdom wing is I'm the beneficiary. If I'm less angry, less depressed, less fearful, I'm more courageous, more content, more fulfilled. That's the method for me to become my own marvellous person, and then I can help others.
So love the other one with the quantity of love you
is dependent upon how much you develop yourself. Of course it is.
Oh, okay.
Of course it is. So I'm the beneficiary of the first one. We have to remember that's not bad, it's good. The methods for Buddha to get happy is get less angry, less depressed, less attached.
Yes.
Then you can have compassion for others.
It's not meaning to neglect yourself.
No, on the contrary, you're not neglecting, you're working on yourself. You are not neglecting, you're literally the opposite. You're totally working on yourself, but not in the way we would think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually you can have compassion for even the bad people, because you know we're all in the same boat, all causing suffering.
But yes, this is high school anyway.
That's university level,
University.
Compassion. Yeah.
University level.
Compassion is university.
Wow, and we are blind and we are...
Blind as bats. That's
yes,
what Buddha was, often they use the word Buddha to mean fully awake.
Yes.
And so that means the more we get rid of the rubbish and the misconceptions, the more courage and clarity and joy we have, then we can be of benefit to the world and have courage to help.
And we are going in this, sometimes, it is a kind of spiritual supermarket.
Sometimes, it is.
Yes, and we go here and there and we
got grab tools, use tools and go deep.
So far away
That's
of
right.
what you live and said, Venerable. Beautiful. So
one step at a time, okay? And have confidence.
One step at a time.
One step at a time,
Yes, so...
why don't I sing a tiny prayer to finish? It's, may compassion grow and grow. Shall I do that?
Please.
15 seconds. In Tibetan.
Please,
Okay.
more. We have 3 minutes, so
We do?
please.
Okay, well, I'll sing one prayer. I'll sing 2 prayers and you can decide what you want.
Yeah, thank you.
One prayer is a little dedication. It's saying, here we've been for this period, talking, listening, each of us, and as many moments as there have been, as many seeds we've planted. So we think, may we nourish these seeds with our own hard work on ourselves, for our sake, but also for the sake of others. And the second little prayer just makes the aspiration that compassion grow in the hearts of all. Okay?
Thank you,
Venerable.
Thank you, please.
Gewadi nyududag lama sangye drubyune drowa chikyang malupa dei sala pasho Jangshub semchog rinpoche ma kye panam ke gyuchig kye panyam pa me payang gong ne gong du pasho